The storm rolled over the violet plains with a slow and rumbling force that made the tall crystal grass bend as if trying to bow toward the ground. John had been traveling for hours across the wide stretch of land that shimmered under the twin suns. His small shelter pack hung from his back as he searched for signs of the research outpost that had gone silent 3 days earlier. Each step pressed into soil that glowed faintly under his boots, leaving a trail of fading light behind him. He had grown used to strange landscapes during his work with frontier worlds, but this planet had an unusual calmness that sat on his mind like a weight. When the wind shifted, he heard a faint cry carried across the plain. It was small at first, like a distant whistle shaped by fear. John stopped and raised a hand to shield his eyes from the harsh golden glare of the low sun. The sound came again, sharper now, and he could feel the urgency inside it. He ran toward it without hesitation, pushing through the tall grass that brushed against his arms. As he sprinted, he saw a shimmer of movement ahead. Something small moved unevenly, as if it were hurt. John reached a small ravine where bright stones jutted from the walls like teeth. The cry echoed through the narrow space, and he climbed down carefully. Near the base of the ravine, he found a small alien child curled beside a fractured stone. The child's skin was pale blue with faint green lines that pulsed softly like distant stars. Its 2 trembling hands clutched its leg where a sharp ridge of crystal rock had cut deep. The child looked up when John approached, eyes wide with fear and pain. John knelt beside the small figure and kept his voice steady. He spoke softly to calm the child and showed his empty hands so it would not flee. The child blinked and whispered a word he did not understand, but it sounded like a plea for help. John carefully wrapped the wound with a clean bandage from his kit. The child winced but slowly relaxed as the bandage tightened. Its breathing steadied, and it placed one hand on John's wrist, a gesture that seemed to hold gratitude inside it. He lifted the child into his arms. It weighed less than he expected, almost light enough for the wind to carry away. The child rested its head against his shoulder with a quiet trust that made John feel protective in a way he had not felt in years. His steps were slow and steady as he climbed out of the ravine. Once he reached the top, he looked around, unsure where the child had come from. Then he saw a cluster of shapes moving across the horizon. They glided with a smooth and deliberate motion, as if carried by calm currents of air. Their armor shone like silver flame, and each held a long spear shaped from a metal he did not recognize. He held the child closer as the figures approached. The group formed a half circle around him with their spears lowered. Their eyes were dark and alert, each one fixed on him. John raised his hand slightly to show he meant no harm. The child stirred and reached toward the silver warriors. At the sight of the gesture, the warriors hesitated. One of them stepped forward and spoke in a sharp, rhythmic tone. The child responded weakly and reached toward him again. The leader lowered the spear and signaled the others to stand down. John let out a slow breath. The leader examined the child's wound, then looked at John with an expression that carried both respect and surprise. Without speaking further, the leader signaled for John to follow. John walked beside them with the child in his arms as they moved toward a distant cluster of towering structures that rose like silver trees from the ground. As they approached the city, he was struck by its beauty. Every tower curved like a living plant shaped by light. Bridges stretched between them in arcs of glowing metal. The gates opened without sound, and the guards guided him through wide streets, lined with floating lanterns that released soft blue light. Citizens stopped and stared as they passed, their eyes lingering on John with a mix of confusion and disbelief. A human walking at the center of their guards was clearly not a common sight. The guards led John toward a grand hall at the heart of the city. Its entrance was framed by pillars shaped like spiraling wings. Inside the hall, there were hundreds of armored figures standing in formation. At the end of the hall sat the queen upon a seat carved from crystal. Her presence was powerful yet calm. Her skin was a deeper shade of blue, and her eyes shone with quiet wisdom. The room was silent as John approached. The child shifted and whispered softly, and the queen rose from her seat with a grace that made the hall fall even quieter. She approached John slowly and placed her hand gently on the child's head. The child responded with a small sound of relief. The queen turned her gaze toward John. For a moment the hall felt like it held only the two of them. She examined the bandage and noted the careful way John had wrapped the wound. Her voice was soft, but carried through the hall with ease as she spoke to him in a formal tone. Although John did not understand the words, the intent behind them felt clear. Gratitude sat inside every syllable. The queen then issued a command to her guards. Two approached with respectful postures and received the child from John. As they carried the child away, the queen gestured toward John and signaled for him to follow her. He was brought through a wide corridor filled with murals that told stories of their people. Each mural showed scenes of bravery and devotion between clans. The queen led him into a smaller chamber lit by floating stones that glowed with soft light. She spoke again, this time slower. A translator device was brought forward by one of her attendants. John placed it at his ear. When the queen spoke again, her words came through clearly. She asked his name and why he had been traveling near the ravine. John explained his mission, the silent outpost, and how he had heard the child's cry. When he mentioned the injury, the queen's expression softened. She told him the child was her youngest, lost during a training excursion when a sudden ground quake had separated her from the guards. John felt a wave of shock. He had not known he was holding a royal child. The queen stepped closer and placed a hand on his arm. Her eyes, dark and deep, held a warmth he had not expected from a ruler. She told him the child lived because of him. She said her people owed him a debt. John tried to downplay his actions, saying any decent person would have helped a child in danger. The queen shook her head gently. She told him that many on this world feared humans and would have mistaken him for an enemy. She said his actions spoke more loudly than any record or report. She called for her council, and they gathered around. After a brief discussion, she turned back to John and made a declaration. The translator carried the meaning clearly. From that moment, he was to be honored as a guardian of their house. It was a title not given casually. The attendants bowed to him. John stood still, feeling uncertain. The queen told him he would not be forced to stay if he wished to leave, but that her people would treat him as one of their own if he remained. John thought of the silent research outpost. He still needed to find it. The queen listened to his explanation and sent a team of scouts to investigate. She told John he would stay as a guest until the matter was resolved. He agreed, though he felt strange being treated with such respect by a people who had regarded humans with suspicion. During his stay, he learned much about their culture. Their cities were built on harmony between metal and living light. Their warriors trained not only in combat, but in meditation and diplomacy. Their children learned responsibility before they learned pride. John spent time with the young royal he had rescued. The child, now healed, clung to him whenever he visited. The queen often watched these moments with a thoughtful expression. As days passed, the scouts found the remains of the research outpost. A sudden ground collapse caused by shifting crystal layers had consumed the station. John felt a deep sadness for his missing colleagues, but the queen placed a hand on his shoulder in comfort. She told him the land sometimes swallowed structures without warning, and that her people mourned with him. John prepared to return to his ship. But as he stood at the gates, the queen approached him. The child ran beside her and held tight to John's leg. The queen spoke with a firm yet gentle tone. She told him he had a place in her house. She told him her people wished him to remain, and that she herself hoped he would accept the bond he had earned. John felt the weight of her words. He looked at the child who trusted him so openly. He looked at the city that had shown him respect beyond anything he had known. He understood what the queen was offering. Not just honor, but belonging. Not just gratitude, but connection. He thought of the empty outpost and the loneliness that would follow him if he returned to the long, silent corridors of frontier work. He looked at the queen and told her he would stay. A quiet smile touched her lips. Relief washed through the crowd. The child cheered and wrapped small arms around him. John felt warmth spread through him as he realized he was no longer a wandering stranger. He had become a guardian of a new world, a world that now held him close, not out of duty, but out of genuine acceptance. The queen placed her hand on his arm once more. She told him that from that day onward, he walked under her protection and her trust. John stood tall and nodded. He had found purpose again. He had found a people who saw him not as an outsider, but as one of their own. And as the silver towers rose behind him and the violet plains stretched before him, he felt the first true sense of home he had known in many years.